Hello everybody, Randy Patrick here. Time for Housing Bubble 2.0 News of the Week, or as I like to call it, another episode of As the Housing Market Turns. And it certainly has over the past week. So again, apologize for not actually having a video out last week. I was busy preparing for my event, my Distressed Property Summit event that I had over the weekend. So it was, I think it went very well. A lot of good information, a lot of good feedback. I'd like to thank those who are viewers who actually attended. That was very nice to see people who we've communicated with, obviously via YouTube here. But it was so I'll be doing more of those in the near future. So a good success. Learned lots, got some good intel and feedback to hear what people want to know about real estate. I'll be working towards doing stuff, to suit for the masses what you guys want to hear. Anyway, really busy week, and we'll get into it right now. Again, I'm just off the cuff today, no real preparation, just trying to get stuff done and catching up here. So here we go. So biggest news last week, I think you could say, would be the U.S. home price growth. It was the slowest since 2012. Reason being, Case-Shiller released their information, their numbers for February, and we found that basically it was the weakest growth, annual growth since September 2002. So basically that's the situation. So everything is slowing down here. The 20 city composite, which is kind of the 20 major metro cities index, really is only 3% above where it was before. National index 11.1% from our 2006 peak, if you remember that, and the 10 city has no change from the previous month. It's at 0. So anyway, but the whole point though is that we're seeing things slowing down. We're seeing values that are like we'll call it negative appreciation, or depreciation. It's slowing down. We're not quite below the line yet, but we're certainly getting there. And again, back in the summertime 2018, our peak was 11.6% above the 2006 peak. We are, as of this month, February, 11.1% above that peak. So very interesting. And again, the U.S. national, I guess you could say, rate was about 4% year-over-year growth. So again, it's not bad, but it's slowing down. And when you take a look at some of the locations here, some of them actually had, were negative growth between this month and the previous month. That would have been Boston, Charlotte, Cleveland, and Minneapolis actually had a bit of a negative growth on that, which is interesting. Las Vegas was the winner, 9.7 year-over-year growth, big time. Portland with 6 point. Actually, wait a second, is that Portland? That is Phoenix with 6.7% growth, and funny enough, Tampa with 5.4% growth year over year for year over year change. So interesting to note that no more double digits. Yes, certain markets are going to have little spikes here and there. Las Vegas is still strong for whatever reason that's going on out there. But again, most of the changes I'm looking here are sub 5% year over year changes. Most of them are really in the 2s to 3% changes. And when that's a year over year change. When you start looking at the difference between the January and February, it's percentage points. So basically, not one city out of the 20 composite had a 1% over 1% increase. Everything is either negative or 0.2%, 0.4%, 0.6%. So pretty slow growth as far as property values are concerned, trend that we're going to see go on for quite some time. So having said that, guess what? The Bay Area median home price drops for the first time in 7 years. So the San Francisco Bay Area declined last month on a year-over-year basis for the first time in 7 years. This is all according to CoreLogic. The median price paid for an existing home in the 9 counties in the area was $830,000, which was down 0.1% from the same time in March 2018. Now, going back to what I just said, are down 0.1%. That's not a huge, that's 0.1%. That's not huge. Is it cause for panic? No. But the point, though, is that it did drop. It fell below the line, and this is the first time, basically, in 7 years. And basically, prices have been increasing for 83 consecutive months. So when you actually see that happen, it's like, okay, we've had so much of this, and now we've plateaued, and now we've got a little bit of a dip. I find that very interesting. So just to get down into it right now, there's a number of counties that I guess are included in the Bay Area. You've got Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, Napa, San Fran, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Solano, and Sonoma. Out of those counties, every county had negative I guess you could say, year-over-year changes on numbers sold, like actual units of property sold. So big time. We're talking, 14, 16%, 17%, 26% negative year-over-year from March to March. And on the median price, we actually had 3 locations. So Marin County, Santa Clara County, and Sonoma County actually posted year-over-year declines, and then with some very modest, 1.5, 2%, 0%, 0.4% increases for some of these other counties. It gave us a net of 0.1% year-over-year decrease. So that's one of the most expensive places in America is this area, and obviously sales are down. People aren't buying. People don't want to buy. People are going to wait, and now we're starting to see that with some of the changes in house price values on what's being sold. So very, very interesting. And again, when we've had so long of it going way up here, it's got to plateau. It's got to come down at some point in time. So again, this is a small, we'll call it sales value decline, but it's the start, right? First time in 7 years, you got to start someplace, kind of like the last housing crisis, had to start somewhere as well too. Okay, having said all that, we'll follow up with luxury home sales crashed the last quarter, biggest year-over-year decline since 2010. So again, following up what I just said about the Bay Area here, obviously the demand for the most expensive homes in the nation pretty much collapsed in the first quarter of this year. Sales of homes listed above $2 million plunged 16% year over year last quarter, the most significant decline since 2010, according to Redfin. Obviously, it comes at a time when sellers understand that the cycle is turning as they flood real estate markets across the country with homes, depressing prices for the 4th straight quarter. So on the luxury side, we've seen, they tend to get hit harder and get hit first before the rest of the homes. So obviously they've had a number of quarters of declines in sales. This is the biggest drop right now. So basically the so if we have a 16% year over year, the sales of homes listed plunged 16% year over year, and the supply of homes surged 14% in first quarter 2019. So obviously sales are down, inventory coming up. That means more choice for buyers. We should see further price reductions and further sales values dropping here. If you want to go to the nitty gritty, let me go to it here. I've got it written down. Places that are getting hit in the higher end, obviously Boston's losing about 10%, Newport Beach 33%, looks like Miami about 12%, San Jose about 6.5%, San Diego 4%, San Francisco about 10%, Los Angeles 17.9% decrease, Naples about a 6% decrease. Seattle, looks like Seattle plateaued. No increase, no decrease, so it's at the tipping point here. And West Palm, Florida, minus 23% increase year-over-year change in sales of $2 million plus homes. So again, things are changing in the marketplace. So we're talking about home prices and being too expensive. Well, interesting because Americans can't afford to buy a home in 70% of the country. So even at a time of low rates and rising wages, Americans can't simply afford to buy a home in 70% of the country. And again, one of those things, according to Adam Data Solutions, these counties included locations like LA County and San Diego, as well as places like Maricopa County in Los Angeles. New York City area claimed the largest share of a person's income to purchase a home, while on average, earners nationwide need to spend only 33% of their income on a home. Residents in Brooklyn and Manhattan need to shell out more than 115% of their income to get into a house, which is quite a lot of money. So again, a lot of these larger locations, big time. Just so you know that there was a howmuch.com actually had an area that said that, the salary needed to buy a home in the top 50 of the U.S. metros, the cheapest metro locations in the U.S., so least expensive to live in, which means, and then they take a look at this, they go from median house price, median salary, making some assumptions of, current mortgage rates, 20% down, things like that. Well, apparently one of the cheapest places to buy a house would be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, followed by Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Memphis, Indianapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Birmingham, and Buffalo. So interesting. So when you hear that's the top 10 least expensive places. So you take a look at all these locations. What do they have in common? They are not the West Coast. They're not the East Coast, they're kind of central mid-America. Very interesting. So I don't know whether we see people who are leaving those locations and there's more volume available, more inventory, or the fact that it's just, those areas don't have high swings in appreciation and depreciation. So there you go. Now, the 10 most expensive metro areas. The first is, of course, San Jose. The next is San Fran, San Diego, LA. So the top 4 locations are in California. Next comes Boston, New York City, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Denver, and Portland. So when you take a look at all this, Washington, New York, and Boston are East Coast. Denver kind of in the middle, everything else West Coast stuff. So sort of goes, as I said, cheapest stuff in the middle of the country, more expensive on the eastern seaboard and western seaboard. Simple as that. But again, just it goes to show. So because of this information, obviously the higher, more expensive locations will see the greatest differences in their price swings. Which brings us to some interesting things to talk about as well too. And really what boils down to that, more and more people are at risk nowadays with respect to some of the climate issues and environmental things that are going on. And I'm not going to comment on global warming or things like that. That's other discussions for different types of people to go into that. But the point is that over the past few years, we've seen a lot more wildfires, forest fires, a lot more flooding, a lot more tornadoes, and obviously hurricanes hitting our coastal areas. So the problem is, natural disasters will wreak some havoc on the real estate market. And we're looking here at housing replacement costs. So, housing costs have risen over the past few years, and now we're finding that many people are actually underinsured with respect to what it's going to cost to fix some of your problems, replace your home, fix your home, if you've had a natural disaster that's gone through your area. Now, we know that in some locations, I guess certain disasters weren't even contemplated with respect to insurance. I know that in the Houston area, many people who suffered from the massive floods that after the hurricanes there, did not actually have flood insurance, and the reason being because the FEMA maps and the layouts of all the, I guess you could say, heights off sea level were not as up to date or haven't been looked at for a while, so therefore they weren't required by their mortgage company to actually have flood insurance. So your basic insurance is only going to cover so much. You're going to have a high deductible, and then if you can't fix your home, what are you going to do? Well, typically you do nothing. You stop paying your mortgage. A lot of these homes fall into default. So the point though is that the cost of rebuilding these homes has risen significantly in the past 2 years, and it's continuing to rise, basically due to severe construction labor shortage. And that's basically skilled labor and or the costs that are associated with that, as well as new tariffs on building material. So it's like a double whammy here. And what will eventually happen is that they either can't fix their home or it's underfixed, can't sell it, can't cash out. Eventually, you're going to need a short sale, go to foreclosure, lose your home, things like that. So a lot of problems going on here. Interesting though that that's why I'm saying there's a risk to the mortgage market here. And following the three major hurricanes of 2017. And I track this, so I know serious delinquency and mortgage rates tripled in Houston and Cape Coral, Florida, and obviously the metropolitan areas, those metropolitan areas down in Florida, and they quadrupled in San Juan, Puerto Rico, according to CoreLogic, and obviously the wildfire caused delinquency rates to spike 50% in Santa Rosa, California. So you can see that in certain areas of the country, they really get affected and hit hard by whatever disasters happen. It can change the dynamic there, causing people to default just because, you've got damage to your home, damage to the place of work, you're displaced, you can't work, you're not getting paid, you can't pay your mortgage, you can't live in your home. It's a domino effect, but these things do happen, and essentially it does affect people after all this has been been cleaned up, etc. So more issues to come, but again, we are underinsured. We'll probably see some changes in the future, just to hopefully that'll change a little bit. All right. Started going on with the whole foreclosure issue. Saw something today that came across my desk. I found this very interesting. Looks like the researchers at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee and Marquette University, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee and Marquette University, two separate universities, did a study and found that homeowners who lost their home in the Great Recession, or homeowners who were facing corrections-related foreclosures, were less likely to head to the polls and vote. So according to the study, the voting declined by individual homeowners, but also entire neighborhoods that were hit by foreclosure were affected. So they didn't just see one or two people, they actually saw the whole neighborhood not come out and vote, which I think is interesting. And I guess the point, though, is that the elected officials aren't hearing from their constituents, and the constituents aren't there actually asking for help and trying to see if there are things that their local, state, or even federal government can do to help them in this time of crisis. So for whatever reason, if you're hit in a financial foreclosure crisis, it's definitely impacting voter turnout to the polls, and unfortunately then it impacts what can be done to assist these people in need. So something to think about and how this sort of works through. I found that was kind of interesting. So again, if we have every year we have issues, this is going to affect voting, and there could be many reasons. It could be just disinterest. It could be the fact that you're displaced. So you live in Sonoma County and your home burnt down. You can't live there. Where are you going to go? You're going to go someplace else. So maybe you're not receiving information to tell you where to vote or you should vote, etc. So there's all these things that can actually transpire and really affect multiple levels of infrastructure and finances once, I guess you could say, disasters happen. So I found that kind of interesting. All right, according to Redfin, Americans are on the move big time. So they just did their 2019 Redfin's migration report, and obviously when they do their analysis, it says 25% of home searchers look to move to another metro in the first quarter of 2019. And I guess the location that received the most net inflow in Q1 2019 was Phoenix, Arizona. So Phoenix, Arizona has led 2019 so far with influx. I know a lot of people who comment on here, you're saying a lot of influx is coming from California. So we're seeing people leaving California, cashing up, moving to Phoenix, which should be a little bit cheaper, and your money is going to go farther. So Phoenix, of course, will be the recipient. So again, we're seeing shifting of population, migration from coastal to inland, north to south, etc. So we're seeing the balance is moving around across the country. So I found that was very interesting as well. One last thing to talk about here. Again, a lot of these things I'm talking about or discussing kind of resonate back with the last housing crisis, 2007, 8, 9, when everything kind of blew apart. So please keep that in mind. A lot of the things that happened then are repeating right now as we speak. Inflated and overpriced retail real estate turns Manhattan into a wasteland. So essentially what happened is after the last housing crisis, a lot of downtown New York and downtown Manhattan, a lot of stores closed, a lot of businesses closed, things changed and shifted, and a lot of the retail space was boarded up or just vacant and not utilized. It looked like a bit of a ghost town. Well, funny enough, that's happening again right now. So obviously we've been in some financial crisis for the past couple of years. Every other day you read about more and more stores, retailers, big box brands are closing, changing operations, just paring down or simply going bankrupt. So a lot of stuff is changing in the retail environment, and that's going to affect certain locations across the country, especially places like Manhattan, where you've got very, very expensive real estate on some of these streets, and now you've got nobody who's paying for that. So interesting enough, it's an interesting article, but the point though, I guess the CEO of Starbucks was in town, and he basically said now as a result of what we're witnessing, we're also seeing something else, and that is there's a proliferation around the country right now of empty storefronts. We took a walk in New York 2 weeks ago from 59th Street to 79th Street on Madison Avenue, and we lost count of how many empty storefronts there were in Manhattan. It reminded me of the cataclysmic financial crisis of 2008. But what's happening is very simple. The rent structures of the last 5 to 10 years have been rising at historic rates, and retailers do not have the amount of customers they had during the last 5 to 10 years and could no longer economically survive. So, stores closing, great locations in big cities are becoming ghost towns now, and there could be many reasons for this. I mean, there could be, of course, the online proliferation of spending your money and not having to go out. Could be state and local taxes hitting retails harder. Obviously, less people moving away from the expensive locations, which means less of them in the city, less of them spending their money in the city. So there's so many things that can go on, but in the end, the key. What I hear is that reminded me of the cataclysmic financial crisis in 2008. So what we're hearing these days is a lot of similarities to what happened a little over a decade ago, and that's the point here. So if you want to, if people say, well, when's this housing crisis going to happen? Well, it's happening now, and typically it sort of has been unwinding for a couple years before we really see it take effect. So we're actually going through it right now. We know the signs are there. We know things are changing, and it's only going to get worse from different perspectives as time goes on. I mean, I could talk about 50 different charts every day. Clearly that's not as interesting as just going through the highlights here, but when you start digging into this information, things are changing. It's not just obviously, again, this is referred to as the Great Depression. It wasn't not just the housing crisis, it's the Great Depression, and a lot of these things are occurring again. I'll do a future video the next little while about what happened, 10 years ago and what's happening right now. You'll be shocked at the exact similarities. Things that happened then are happening now, maybe different order, maybe different nuances, but the same premise is there. So at some point in time, things are going to slow down, and they're slowing as we see them, and they're going to slow down faster, and they're going to accelerate, and then we're going to see some more drops in pricing and a lot more inventory come in the marketplace. So please keep that in mind. But if you need to buy a house now, I know how you're feeling. You want to look for something and get value. As I always say, never pay retail, right? Put lower offers in, negotiate, ask for concessions, ask for things, ask for credit. What I mean by that is, okay, the house that you're going to buy, is $500,000. It needs about 30 grand worth of repair work, new floors, new cabinets, new counters. Well, ask for a credit from the seller. So you'll pay their $500,000 price, but you want a credit for 30 grand. So it all nets out to you positively in the end. So just think of things and think of ideas, to pay less for property and leverage what you can with the sellers. And again, if you're a seller, I'd really look at your marketplace now. Does it make sense to put it on the market now? Should you put it in the market now? Can you withstand in the next couple of years? So decisions we all have to make, and that's the number one question I get on here is that, do I buy now? Do I sell now? Well, you have to take a look at your own marketplace. See what's going on, understand, go to the realtor sites, go to the state sites, take a look at, do you see growth? Do you see prices that are still increasing? I think from a generic national perspective, we see value slowing down every month. The year over year is less and less. So we're going to hit that flat line where we're not increasing, and we're going to go below that line in a few months. So again, Redfin's already showed the fact. Last week I spoke about the fact that we dip below the line via the Redfin stats, and Case-Shiller typically drags about 3 to 4 months behind. But the thing is, both lines are downward trending. And that is something that's very important, and we gotta keep that in mind and take a look at it. So, all right, guys, that's it. I'll have another video out later this week. I want to get into some more interesting thing for you guys. So thank you for the views. Sorry for the time delay of getting it out here, but just too much on the go. So thank you again for the views, the comments, the likes. Please share the video with your friends. Please post on Twitter if you got a Twitter account. That helps my channel grow as well too. Obviously, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Please subscribe. Love to hear from you guys. Ask me questions. Ask me about investing. Ask me about retail stuff. I love to engage. We'll talk about real estate in the future. So again, thanks very much, and we'll speak to you later in the week.